schedule to come to our open house. I hope that the open house was helpful for you to learn a little bit more about the work that we do at the Immigrant Welcome Center. Now you know where we're located, so please make an appointment, come and talk to us more if you want to learn more about our other programs. I'm so honored today to have this Reuben Education Series. Many of you have been asking for a long time about our Power Partner calls and our Reuben Education Series. So we are using this Reuben Education Series to relaunch our Power Partner calls. They are going to be, and this is all based on the feedback that we received from you, they are going to be more thematic, so we're going to focus and dig into the issues. And the first issue that we're going to dig into is housing. So this Reuben Education seminar today, discussion, panel discussion, whatever you'd like to call it, is the launch of our new Power Partner calls. We are recording this so that we are able to put this on our YouTube page. So our YouTube page is live and active now, so visit our YouTube page for lots of good informational videos. Some of the videos that we are posting there are Zoom instruction videos in different languages. So when you have clients who speak different languages but don't know how to use Zoom, we are trying to record those kind of videos, and then these educational series so that you can visit them at any time. It's my pleasure to have the distinct panel lists today. Misty Cisneros, who you met earlier, our housing coordinator, is going to be our moderator for this conversation. So Misty has been with us since last April, and her position was focused on helping individuals, bilingual individuals, complete their indie rent applications, find resources for housing. So this is what we're going to discuss today. We also have Rabbi Aaron Spiegel with us. He is the interim executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council and co-chair at GMA. He's an experienced leader and strategic planner in nonprofit management, IT, and digital marketing, as well as a technology consultant, published author, and a seasoned public speaker. As a trans-denominational rabbi, his focus is on bringing equity and justice into all organizations. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Matt Nolan, he is the interim community analysis manager with the Polis Center at IUPY. He works to get data about neighborhoods into the hands of people working in communities. He focuses on information design, project management, and spatial analysis for projects like Savvy, community research reports, and the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis. Thank you, Matt. Evan Beaver, he's a senior pastor at the First Baptist Church of Indianapolis. He is also a member of the board of directors of Patchwork Indy since 2019, and the board of directors of the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana since 2016. Welcome. Magdalene Morales, she is an administrative receptionist at the John Bonner Neighborhood Centers. She is a native Spanish speaker who helps clients with interpretation, resource access, and filling out applications. Welcome. Thank you. Misty?
Thank you. Before I begin, I would like to sincerely thank everybody for being here today. I know your time is very valuable, so I hope you all take a lot of information and gain from this event today. So once again, thank you. Everybody has been provided with a data flyer that includes a closer look at housing at IWC since January of 2021. So, since in the past 12 months, housing has been the top searched.
Project your voice a little bit
Yes.
more in the back here.
Yes, thank you.
Misty.
We have a database that can be found on our website. It's IWC Connect, and I recommend everybody check it out. On this database, housing has been the top searched resource in the past 12 months, with a total of 3,215 housing searches. To go a little bit more into detail about what these searches are like, 214 have been help pay for housing, 210 help find housing, and 168 rent, and finally 151 are help pay for utilities. Over the past year, we have reached 816 individuals through our outreach and education services and events. These include events in partnership with other organizations such as Patchwork Indie. Last summer we went to an apartment complex that had been going through neglect from their management, and so we were there and we provided material on renters' rights. And this community is largely made up of undocumented families, and so it was just very impactful and important for us to let them know they have rights as renters. And it was just very impactful, very meaningful. We've also created videos in collaboration with GMOND, Rabbi Aaron here, and in which we went into the Immigrant portal, did what we call dummy applications, where I just did enough to get through the applications, but the main goal was to get screenshots of every single step of the application in order to create a tutorial, both in English and Spanish, and it explained the application step by step so that individuals could watch it at home, pause, share, and just have a little bit more accessibility and better understand the process as a whole. We have been able to assist 315 immigrants, and this includes rental and utility assistance. This number wouldn't be possible without the help of our natural helpers, our team, and of course our database and our website, and everybody who has contributed to helping here at Immigrant Welcome Center. The top 3 countries of origin served are Haiti, Nigeria, and Mexico. What I have found, fun fact, a lot of people, immigrants from Haiti, are able to speak Spanish, and that is where I am also able to assist them. And of course, Mexico, as Spanish being one of the top spoken languages, I'm also able to assist them as I am bilingual. We do use the assistance of Luna Language Line to assist individuals who speak other languages. These are the top 4 zip codes served, and throughout time I have been able to form connections and just have conversations with different landlords and property managers to better understand the requirements of different communities to help those who live in those 4 zip codes and beyond. Okay. So that is the information that is on the flyer today. You're welcome to take it home, and at the end of the panel you're also welcome to ask any questions regarding that. We will now begin our panel, which will consist of questions and will consist of data, issues faced, resources available, and then at the end, storytelling and a conclusion. The first topic we will discuss today is data. So my first question is for Matt. What data is available that describe the needs and if they are being met in a meaningful manner, as well as what is Savvy working on to inform our community members about the specific housing needs of our immigrant neighbors?
Yeah, sure. So I am from the Polis Center, and one of the long-standing programs of the Polis Center is called Savvy, the Savvy Community Information System. This is a really good data source for information about housing and the immigrant population in Indianapolis. There's a number of different tools on there that allow people to easily find data themselves. But if you go to savvy.org, SAVI.org, you should be able to see, if you click on Use data tools, then you'll be able to see the different options available to you. So in there, there's, like I said, data about housing, which can be really helpful. We have information like the kind of tracking the cost of rent for folks neighborhood by neighborhood, tracking how much people spend on mortgages. And then one important indicator is called the housing cost burden. So if this is defined as if a household spends more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities on a monthly basis, then they're considered housing cost burdened. So it's interesting to look at what share of a certain neighborhood or what share of our city is housing cost burdened. So all that's available in Savvy as well. Now, when I started thinking about this panel, I thought it would be interesting to see how housing cost burden intersected with immigration. And so we get that data about housing cost burden from a census survey called the American Community Survey. And every year they survey 1 million people across the country and come up with these estimates of indicators like housing cost and income and household size and race and country of origin and all these things down to the neighborhood or census tract level. So I thought it'd be interesting to use that data set to try to understand how what the census calls foreign-born residents relate to housing cost burden. And so if you want to dig that deep and see, like, for example, not just how many people are housing cost burden, but how many people who are foreign-born are housing cost burden, then we don't really have that level of detail in our self-service tools. But the great thing about Savvy is you can always email us and we'll help you find that level of detail from the census sources and things like that. So go to savvy.org and our contact is there too. Honestly, what I found was interesting. There's not a stark difference in the percent of people that are housing cost burden if you're looking at US born versus foreign born. And I think there's a couple things going on there. The foreign born population is a big and diverse population that has a whole range of people. Some have many resources, some don't. And so it's just sort of like our US born population. If you have a lot of resources, housing can be easier to come by, and if you don't, it's more difficult to pay for it. So it's really kind of that simple. But it was interesting to see where that housing cost burden was highest for foreign-born renters, which tended to be in Center Township, which is not much of a surprise, but also in places like Lawrence Township, Washington Township, and on the south side in Perry and parts of Decatur Township. About half of foreign-born renters are housing cost burdened in those places. So that's some of the information we have as it relates to housing in Savvy. Now, we also have really great neighborhood level information about immigration and the ancestry of a population in a neighborhood or languages spoken there. So you can use Savvy to find out, in which census tracts do Puerto Rican folks tend to live, or in which census tracts is German spoken more frequently, and things like that. So yeah, check us out, and if you have any questions about how to access that data, you can email us. Our email address is right on the website. And then I guess the last thing I'd add is we're working on a video that makes it easy to see how can I use these Savvy tools to understand the immigrant population in Indianapolis. So that'll be up in I think a few weeks, so keep an eye out for that.
Thank you, Matt. My next question is from Magali. As one of the only Spanish speakers at the Bonner Center, you've had to step up when Spanish-speaking community members call or walk through the doors of the center. What is the most sought-after resource amongst the immigrant population?
So I've been at the Bonner Center almost a year. So when I started, I never saw one Hispanic immigrant, nothing. And then slowly, I started seeing, and then other people will come and say, oh, my friend told me. So I said, oh, well, it was probably that client, said, oh, go, they speak Spanish now. So yeah, now I have more Spanish-speaking clients. But the number one thing that I see is always indie rent. And also utilities. For indie rent, they don't require your legal status. It doesn't matter. As long as you were working February of 2020, pre-pandemic, and then your hours at work were cut, or something along those lines. You got COVID, you couldn't work for a while, but that's the most important, working February 2020. And a lot of people say, well, that was a long time ago, and I don't remember, but yeah, because they request the proof, because they say indie rent is COVID relief. That's how they should have titled it different, I think, because indie rent, to me, it just seems, oh, help with rent, okay, but it is COVID relief for them. Now we also doing utilities. The season is now closed, but it will reopen in October. And for that, you do need a valid Social Security card. But let's say your children were born here, you can still apply, but they will just count those that have a valid Social Security card. And that's something else that some people don't know. So they still try to help, and yeah, indie rent housing is also very, John Bonner does have housing, but their wait list is like 3 to 4 years right now. So what they did, they closed the wait list, because they just said it's unfair, really, to give people hope in 4 years. A lot of things can happen in 4 years. So their wait list is closed, because people are they're not moving out, and we have a list of housing apartments in the area, but it hasn't really been updated since COVID. So that's the only thing that when people come, that's my only resource that I give people. And they would just have to call. It is income based. They would just have to call and see if they have any openings.
Thank you, Magali. Thank you. Evan, you are the lead pastor at First Baptist Church, which has been a long-time home and safe place to different communities who have come through resettlement agencies. Can you please share about the different immigrant populations you've served on the north side and what has done to best assist them?
Definitely. So I am one of the pastors at First Baptist Church, which is a north side church. Has been located in Washington Township. Our building is there in Washington Township and has been for about the last 60 years. So we're located at 86th and College in Nora, if you're familiar with that part of town. And I actually moved here in 2012, and I remember a conversation that year with an elementary school principal who said, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, this was a traditionally diverse neighborhood, which meant it was, there were Caucasian people and there were African American people living in it, attending the schools. And she said, it has become so much more diverse in the last 5 years. And that became around the time I moved here, maybe 5 years before, that became very apparent to the congregation at First Baptist Church in Indianapolis. We are located right across the street from a large apartment complex that at that time was used by Exodus Refugee Resettlement as a major resettlement location, housing location for immigrant families. At that time, hundreds of families were coming from Burma, especially, and many of them were Baptist. So the story goes, I wasn't here, but the story goes, one Sunday, a family from Burma showed up to worship at First Baptist Indianapolis. within a month, there were 40 families. So very quickly, this congregation that for 200 years had been almost entirely white, middle and upper middle class, pretty homogeneous influx of people who looked a little bit different, who didn't speak English and who had come from a completely different culture, were dealing with all the challenges that refugees face. But we're also somehow united with us in our faith tradition. Those were difficult years for the congregation in a lot of ways. That's, if you've ever been in a situation like that or in a neighborhood that grows more diverse suddenly, there are lots of challenges to navigate. But some of the stories from that time are also so inspiring of the ways longtime church members, people in their 70s and 80s just jumped in immediately. They were recognizing all of these needs for transportation, for clothes, for furniture, for food. And so they jumped in, they held drives, they coordinated pickups and drop-offs, and they did all this work to help these new families, these new friends adjust to a new community. You learn a lot doing that kind of work about what works, about what doesn't work, about what's needed, and especially for new refugee communities. I think all of you know there are lots of immediate, very tangible, concrete needs. And 10 or 15 years ago, our congregation was kind of neck deep in responding to those English and language classes especially. Through those relationships, we started to realize that there were all kinds of people in our neighborhood who didn't come just from Burma. The real diversity of our neighborhood started to become apparent in those years. In the last 10 years, we've tried to maintain those relationships with our mostly Karen Burmese friends. We also now host a congregation in our building. We worship alongside a congregation of Kaya Burmese people as well. We've worked with the Congolese communities, and we also host a Spanish language congregation. So we have developed all these connections to different immigrant communities. We've gained a new appreciation of just how rich the diversity is in Washington Township, and especially in Nora, where you have not just the ethnic and linguistic diversity, but real socioeconomic diversity as well. Very high income neighborhoods right next to Section 8 housing, and very much lower income neighborhoods as well. Thinking about needs, and then I promise I'll stop talking. In the early years, it was the concrete needs. It was food, it was language assistance. It's been so exciting, encouraging to see nonprofit partners step in to fill those gaps. We don't see those needs as much anymore. Our schools do an incredible job of working not just with our students from other countries, but also their families. They provide so much support, encouragement, access to resources. But the two issues we've seen, the two really sticky issues, I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone. We see that healthcare access remains a major challenge, especially access to mental health services that are culturally sensitive and appropriate, and especially in the last 5 years, even more so in the last 2 years. The reason we're here today, housing. It's hard for anybody to find housing that's affordable and safe and clean and comfortable. But we know that immigrant families especially face an additional layer of challenges, the language barriers, the application processes, and especially knowing what their rights are, what they're owed, and what they should be entitled to under Indiana law. Just helping people understand that is one thing. And then we also know that the systemic barriers are really high. And that there are, the tenants in Indiana simply don't have as many protections as they might or should. So those are some of the populations we've worked with, since some of the things we've tried to do to help. and some of the needs we're still seeing.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that we can all agree that learning that housing is one of the biggest barriers doesn't come as a surprise. So now we will be moving on from data to the issues faced in our community. My next question is for Matt. What are the barriers in collecting specific data regarding immigrant population and their needs such as housing?
Yeah, well, one barrier is that a lot of the data that we use to understand our communities are from the census or the census's American Community Survey. And there's some known like undercounting and underreporting there, both in the census and the American Community Survey. The difference there is the census happens every 10 years and tries to count or enumerate every single human in the country, right? Whereas the American Community Survey is a sample survey that's sent out to, like I said, 1 million folks, and it's sent out each year, and they mail it to a household, and then they try to call you and follow up, but it's a lot longer than the census, so it has a lot more detailed information. Well, both of those tend to have lower response rates from immigrants and from people who don't speak English, and just generally from people of color as well. So the good news is, like, the information I've seen from the Pew Research Center is that the undercount isn't as bad as you might imagine it is. They're able to, for example, at Pew, estimate the number of immigrants and even undocumented immigrants by sort of understanding what that undercount is and inflating the data a little bit by that amount. But it makes it hard to get reliable data down at like the neighborhood level sometimes. Also, it's just difficult because we're sometimes talking about very small population groups, especially for some of the newer like refugee groups like that have started to arrive in Indianapolis, like from Afghanistan and things like that. The data just isn't gonna, the kind of national data sources aren't gonna catch up to that trend for a while. And even with larger refugee populations, like for example, folks from Burma, I think the American Community Survey estimates there are around 10,000 people in Indianapolis of Burmese ancestry, whereas I know the Burmese American Cultural Institute does their own count and finds something more like, if I remember right, 20,000. So that's a big population that should be easier to count from a survey, but they're apparently way off, right? So it still helps like highlight which neighborhoods those folks live in and things like that, but it's a harder to count population. Then you've got administrative data sets that are maybe more difficult for people of other cultures or languages to participate in a way that would get their data collected. So a good example here is IndyRent. Is that what it's called?
IndyRent.
IndyRent. The first year that IndyRent operated, 2020, only 7% of the applicants were Latino. And based on like income levels and the general need in the Latino community, it was clear like that's I don't know, it's not serving the Latino community at the right kind of scale or proportion that it should, right? So that's why I really am encouraged to hear about the video you guys created to help folks walk through the application and the work you're doing at the Bonner Center to help people one-on-one, because it's those kinds of interactions that can help bridge that gap. And so that's a gap in service, but it also ends up being like a gap in data at the end, right? And then on a long-term basis, we've seen that with unemployment data too. We consistently see that the Latino population has a lower unemployment rate than any other like race or ethnic group, and it just stands out like when you compare that to, again, income levels and poverty rates and things like that. It seems like maybe this doesn't indicate exactly what we think it does. Like unemployment comes from jobs with unemployment insurance, and there's all these administrative routes that work for many people in like many jobs, but don't quite translate to some of the work that immigrants do and things like that. That being said, though, I always like to point out when we're talking about immigrants and Latino folks that, like, in Indianapolis, most Latino folks are born in the U.S., and so we shouldn't conflate those two groups, but they are honestly a related population. But
Thank you. Aaron, can you talk about the issues you face related to the lack of awareness about the resources available amongst immigrant families?
Sure. And I have to apologize. I find it impossible to answer a question without telling stories. I know we're doing storytelling. I first want to give a shout out to Evan and First Baptist. I moved to Nora in 1997 when this was sort of percolating and was a consultant for First Baptist in this conversation. And they were sort of the beacon of hope in the entire neighborhood, because it was not being embraced by a lot of the, at least more vocal residents of Nora. We moved there just because of the diversity of the area, and it's all we could afford. So I don't think we should take lightly the impact that a congregation can have on an immigrant welcoming. If you didn't know, well, secondly, GMA stands for Greater Indianapolis Multi-Faith Alliance. We are fairly new in Indianapolis. We're a project, initially a project out of the Wagner School of NYU. The first of these initiatives is in San Antonio. There's now one percolating in Minneapolis, Dallas, and Miami. And what makes us different is we're about civil conversation, civil dialogue. It's about creating civil dialogue around issues. The other thing that makes us unusual is we don't have the typical interfaith partners, which is Jews, Muslims, and liberal Protestants. We have the black church involved. We have evangelicals involved. We have the Hindus. We have, you name it. And we work really hard to have that conversation. IndyMultifaith.org. Shameless self-promotion over. If you didn't know, Indianapolis is always number 1 or number 2 in evictions in the country. Not per capita, total. It is unconscionable. Several people have mentioned renters' rights. There really aren't any. Indiana as a state has, if not, some of the worst landlord protections of any state in the country. To make it worse, corporate investors have figured that out here in the last really 3 years and are buying up as much rental property as possible because they know they won't have to respond to renters' requests for anything. In my own neighborhood, the College Arms, I think it was called, or is called, deplorable conditions, mostly immigrants, no response. Finally, what did the owners do? They sold it to another out-of-state venture. So evictions is a horrible issue in Indianapolis, and GMA has chosen this as our housing as a top level, but eviction specifically in Indianapolis. The other thing that blows my mind is most people, particularly immigrants, discover rental assistance, IndyRent, when they're in evictions court. From the judge who says, why didn't you apply for evictions resources? Judge, I didn't know about it. And the judges are kind of judgmental about it. Well, why didn't you know about it? I'll save that story for the next question. But they don't know. And when they do find out about it, it's the barriers to applying are high. It's a fairly straightforward process if you understand the language. When Misty did the first video in Spanish, I watched it. I didn't know how to get through the IndyRent site. I don't speak Spanish, but I understood what she was saying, what the things that she was explaining. So the video is a great thing. And then I discovered from Misty here recently, and Magali said, it's COVID relief, which is just maddening. And immigrant families often don't have that documentation. Let's say they were being paid cash. And they're not going to go to the city and say, well, I was paid under the table, call my employer. The employer's not going to verify that, and they're not eligible. So we're doing a couple things. One is we're working towards education around indie rent. We're slowly trying to affect legislation at the state level, and it's a slow grind. And we're really trying to put pressure from the faith community on the mayor's office to see if we can move that indie rent money without the qualifications of COVID. I honestly am not optimistic because that's from the state anyways, which is from the federal government, which, you know, right, we're going to change that. So it's bad enough for the Joe Public, who's white and speaks English and, you know, a native. It's almost insurmountable for folks that have chosen to live in this city to get relief.
Thank you. All right. When assisting community members with indie rent, what are the most common obstacles you and the community member face?
So, if whoever's trying to apply for indie rent, it takes a total about 5 months to get, within 3 months, you know if you're approved or denied. But to actually get the money, it's about 5 months. But in 5 months, you know, the landlord probably filed eviction. So it's, for me, the biggest thing, it's a long time. And it's hard when I'm, you know, telling somebody, oh, okay, you'll get an answer in 3 months. But she's telling me I'm already behind 4 months. You know, and at the time of the application, you have to put the months that you're behind. So indie rent is currently paying up to 12 months. So what it will do, if you're behind 3 months, it'll pay the 3 months you're behind, and then it'll give you 3 months forward. If you are not behind, it will just give you the 3 months going forward. But it's still 5 months. So John Bonner is, I guess, like the father of indie rent, and then it has different community centers like Edna Martin, Favorite Card, Cafe. There's like about maybe 7 or 8, I think. And so what it does, depending on zip code or area you live, that's the community center you're going to. But it's still the same process. So you fill out the application, then the landlord does it. But now they used to have moratorium for indie rent, but there is no longer moratorium. So the landlord, a lot of them now, they're not participating. But indie rent still has to give the landlords a 21-day grace period to fill it out. So you're already, you know, if my landlord's not participating, you're already waiting the 21 days. Then you go into tenant self-funding, and then once you do, so it's either the landlord does it or you do tenant self-funding. So whatever comes first, that's when your 90 days start counting. But see, it's already 4 months, right? And then they communicate through email. So that's another challenge. You know, everything is through email. They hardly don't call you. A lot of people, they always, oh, that's my old number. I have 2 new numbers now ever since. So that's another challenge that I'm seeing. A lot of people are, because they give you 14 days to turn in documents. So if you didn't check your email in those 14 days, you're denied. So what I've asked is, you know, if they were denied for not providing the documents, which is a lease, and proof, because they need those pay stubs from 2020 or a letter from the employer saying, yes, she was working here, paid cash or anything. Those are the two things they ask for, the proof. And so what I've asked is, if this person was denied because they didn't check their email, so they told me yes. As long as they bring in, what was required, we can reopen it. Because once you're denied, it takes you all the way back to step number 1. And, it's just that much longer. So that's something, that I said, okay, wow, I did something, because that's gonna help you hurry up the process. And then once you're approved, it's 30 to 60 days to get that check. Yes?
So like when somebody applied, does that stop the eviction process?
No, so if let's say you did the application, but now 3 months later, they filed for eviction, so they will push you through to the evictions team, and that, they say it speeds up the process a little bit, because they work on the evictions according to court date.
Oh,
That doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna go with the check to the judge, but at least you'll have that email that says you're approved, this amount of money, please wait for the check.
And then it's at the judge's discretion.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we'll highlight some resources that are available. Matt, what resources does Savvy have to help community members and others understand the housing needs of the immigrant community?
Okay, well, I guess I'll be kind of brief here, but we have, like I mentioned, a lot of data tools that are available at savvy.org. So some of them that would be relevant to this conversation are, we have a tool called Topic Profiles, where you basically just click on a topic and you see a big dashboard about that with a bunch of data about that topic. So we have one on community development, and that would have like some housing related data, like number of subsidized units in a neighborhood, or the average rent or mortgage amount in a neighborhood. And then we have another tool called Population Profiles. And so with there, you select a population and you see a dashboard about that group. We have one available on the Hispanic and Latino population. I wish we had one on the immigrant population, but we've talked about doing that with the Immigrant Welcome Center, but we don't have any funding to pursue that right now, so that one's kind of on hold. But that Hispanic and Latino dashboard would be helpful. And then we have another tool called Community Profiles, where you choose a single neighborhood or a group of neighborhoods or something like that, and you can explore all kinds of data about that place. And so if you're focused in on one particular part of town, that might be a good resource for you for data. So all those are at savvy.org. And beyond that, we do also like focused research on particular topics. So like, for example, evictions, we are on August 11th here at the library at 6 p.m. We have an event on analyzing recent eviction data up through, I think, May, something like that. Trying to look at not just the basics of like how frequent are evictions and where are they happening, but also what owners are evicting the most, which owners have the highest eviction rates, and seeing if we can connect that evictions data to like health department code violations data. I'm getting into the weeds, but anyway, if you are interested in evictions, August 11th. So keep checking out our research, and we do a lot of stuff on housing because it's so obviously critical. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Matt, will that
Yes.
be at this library location?
At this library, yes.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Erin, can you please share the efforts GMA is making to spread information regarding housing resources?
Yeah, and I have to tell a story now. So, January this year, I was in a meeting with the mayor. I wasn't the only one. Where he announced the city of Indianapolis has been allocated $90 million towards eviction relief. Yay, yay, yay. I'm always an instigator. I said, that's great. How do people know about it? To which he said, I don't know. If anybody here works for the city, I'm sorry. I'm going to bash the city over there. And he said, that's a good question. Talk to Deputy Mayor Jeff Bennett. So Jeff was very nice to take my call. We had a Zoom meeting, to which he said, we are getting the word out through John Bonner, other community centers, and the libraries. And I love Bonner Center. They do great work. But my point to him was, you're asking people to go somewhere after they already know about this versus going where they're already going for aid. Why aren't you at food banks? Why aren't you at clothing banks? Why aren't you working with the congregational community, churches who have food pantries? To which he said, oh, that's a great idea. That's out of the sphere of normal city thinking, not just Indianapolis. So I said, let's leverage GMA, our network, and get your navigators there. That turned out to be almost impossible. To which we then said, why don't we train volunteers in churches to be the navigators? They said, that's a great idea. And we couldn't get it to happen. Nobody's fault, but there are several. We had some pilot sites that we identified, and I can tell you there's some really frustrated pastors who were waiting for the city to schedule this training. And I'm not very patient. So I was in another meeting and Gurinder was there introducing herself to the Jewish community leadership, and she was talking about housing, and I said, wow, Immigrant Welcome Center is doing housing. I emailed, and she connected me with Misty. And Misty said, yes, we're doing stuff, and I created this video. And after we talked, I watched that and I said, oh my gosh, this is what we need. So I asked if Immigrant Welcome Center would do a video in English for us, and then another one in Spanish. And Misty's a rock star, and we got it done. So our biggest push right now is getting this video to as many congregations as possible in the city. One, if we get it to the people who are applying, great. But more importantly, what I personally would like to see is volunteers trained in congregations to be able to do this with somebody. They show up for food pantry or clothing pantry. We find out they need housing assistance, they're being evicted. Hey, come over here, let's get on the computer and let's start this process. It's not happening fast. There's still a ton of money available. But if I think about the number of people who are going to Bonner Center, I'm going to guess, sorry Matt, I'm not the data guy, there's probably 50 times that people that don't know to go to a community center or go to the library for this. Let's get this information where they live. So if you are representing a congregation, please get with me, I'll connect you. If you're a member of a congregation, as far as I'm concerned, the more people can know about this, the better. And it's free. Free. We're trying to help, and we have no charges attached.
Thank you. Our next section will be a call to action and a storytelling portion. So I will ask for two of our members to tell a story, but then I will open the floor for people in the audience to ask questions or even tell a story of something related to housing, how you have helped someone, or just ask a question that somebody here might be able to answer. Magali, can you please share a success story for an immigrant family you've assisted?
So for me, it's when somebody comes in, I help them, do the application, gather the documents, but then I just send it off, So sometimes I don't know the outcome unless that person comes back and says, oh, can I have more indie rent money? Then I'm like, okay, well, we helped you. But yeah, for me, I just help them mostly because applications are in English. So, just telling them what they need or what they need to bring. But yeah, I'm very fortunate. My parents are immigrants. I was an immigrant coming to this country. So I'm just very pleased and happy that there's more immigrants coming to the Bonner Center now and being able to help them.
Yeah, thank you, and I believe the community is very lucky to have you there. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Evan, based on your valuable experience working with many different immigrant populations, what actions can all of us take here to continue to best support our immigrant neighbors?
Definitely do the things Erin mentioned. Education is so important, and getting that education into the congregations, into the places where interaction already happens with these communities, so important, and that work needs advocates and volunteers to make it happen. It's just legwork. I thought of a story as well. I am on the board of Patchwork Indie, which is a relatively young nonprofit with lots of ambitious goals, mostly to connect diverse populations and celebrate diverse cultures, to provide some assistance as well. But much of that organization's life has been taken up with responding to the housing crisis, and especially advocating for tenants at one apartment complex, or what started as one apartment complex and we eventually realized was 3 or 4 owned by the same kind of bad actor landlords, where conditions were appalling and tenants had no idea what they could do. The way I tell that story, or the way I think of that story, I think of the nonprofit workers who realized there was an urgent need and shifted their priorities to respond to the real urgent needs of the human beings who were sitting right in front of them. I think of the incredible community members, people who weren't being paid by any nonprofit, who were in their free time, spare time, organizing and advocating on behalf of their friends and neighbors, many of whom were immigrants. It was so much to ask. People gave so many hours, so much of themselves, and the work was so hard. Complicated housing is such a complicated issue. There are no quick fixes. There is no transactional way to solve this problem. It's about long-term grassroots advocacy, coalition building. And I am so grateful for the volunteers I've seen doing that work, the volunteers I know are doing that work in my community. And I believe it's hard work, but it's the most important work that all of us can be doing, connecting people, encouraging people to get involved, to vote the issues more than the political party. Vote for people who will make a difference for our community, who will advocate for sensible policies and protections for tenants. And the last thing I'll say, I am a pastor. And I don't know if this has been true in everyone's experience, but I've certainly observed it in my context, that the last few years have been really hard. And coalition building is hard work in a normal season. Intercultural work is difficult and tiring no matter when you're doing it. And over the last few years, I've seen in my community, I've seen in other communities, a very natural, normal instinct to draw back, to kind of circle the wagons, to retreat to safe spaces, to rest. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's totally natural. I imagine you felt it, and I would never want you to feel guilty for feeling it. But my encouragement, my challenge, my hope for our communities is that as we find energy, as we have time once again, that we will remember how valuable these coalitions are, how valuable these intercultural inter-ethnic relationships are, and that we will try to pick up those pieces, pick up where we left off, and continue this work now and in the future as we're able. I know it's hard, but you're all doing amazing work, and I hope you find the energy to keep doing it.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to both questions and storytelling.
So let me stand up, sorry. So my name is Masange. I'm a volunteer. I'm so excited to hear about all of you. The presentation, that was excellent. Thank you so much for your time. Especially Aaron, thank you so much. In addition to that, I didn't come to any organization. I just come as a chairman for Congolese. So actually we have been facing a hard time during COVID. I just moved here in 2020 from Missouri. Then I got a job at CARE, Exodus Refugee Immigration. I was a case manager. Due to those issues, receiving all refugees, they don't speak English. Most of them, they speak different languages. It has been a tough time. So I decided to quit my job so that I can keep helping them because of the, rent issues, the problem, they don't speak English. The really issue was the delays for the documents. When the COVID happens, the green card application was delayed, even right now. Instead of taking like 6 months, it takes 2 years or 3 years. So when they have the work permit, they get expired. And when the work permit expires, they get laid off from their jobs, because if you don't have work permit, they just kick you out. You don't have to work. So it was been a big issue, even right now. So the application exodus was full of people. So, and I was doing the application for green card myself at home, so helping them as a volunteer. So now I'm working weekend shift, Friday, Saturday, Saturday. Friday is 12-hour shift, Saturday is 12-hour shift, and Sunday is 12-hour shift. We have like 500 people from like Congolese people. I speak 6 languages. It's an advantage, but it has been a lot of work. So when I was up here to help my people, like the issue with rents, they told me that you are not a lawyer, you don't have you don't work to any organization, you don't have any card that you can show as help shows that you work with kind of government stuff. I decided to call Legal Shield. If you can see my card, Legal Shield. I pay $6 a month so that I can be an independent associate with Legal Shield. Because I was just up here, they told me that where are you coming from? Why you help people, but who are you? So I didn't have any organization to work with. So I just been connected with the people. They told me you can pay $6 a month to be Legal Shield associate as an independent. So I work as an independent, but I don't get paid, just to help my people. So it has been a really issue. They don't attend school. Eviction was the main issue. Sometimes, as Aaron said, because they just sign their rent, but they don't read the rules to be in the house. If something happens, they don't call. Like sometimes they used to have like 2 weeks they don't cook because their oven is not working, the kitchen is not working, everything is not working. So I'm there to help. The other issue that I faced is the mails, because they are from Africa. We don't have the papers for the mails. They keep sending the mail each and every day. So no one to read all those papers. I have like a bunch of the papers in my house to read and explain to them. So it has been a big issue, but I was excited. Just I was on the internet, find where I can get help. So finally, I just got this event. I just attend, right? I just come, I didn't call, just applied it. I was just registered, and I'm so happy. Hopefully, I'll just get help today, and I'm so excited to meet with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much.
I take too much time.
No, don't be sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to make a quick comment, if it's possible for me to be quick. Evictions are going to get worse. Eviction Lab out of Johns Hopkins, the data is there. It is not going to get better, it's going to get worse nationally. And then in a state like Indiana, where we're so lopsided towards landlords, it will be exponentially worse. So this has, not only is it a human rights and human justice issue, it's going to be an economic issue. We're going to have
Thank you, Rabbi. We're almost out of time, so we'll take one question. You had your hand up? Yes, please go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about Section 8 housing and what that looks like for our immigrant population?
Yeah. Just quickly, last week I was trying to assist somebody to apply for Section 8. The wait list is closed, so you can't even apply at the moment.
Okay.
And if you're not familiar, IHA, to beat up on somebody else, is in the middle of a horrible controversy. The poor woman who's the interim director, I would not want her job, and I believe she is going to be able to make this work, but we're a long way from getting that straightened out. So people looking for any kind of subsidized housing are on a long wait.
Danielle, I think, yeah. Do you have time for one more question?
It's just a shameless plug. So my name's Danielle. I'm with the city of Indianapolis. It's quick, okay, Aaron.
Okay.
You can take all of it. Don't worry. I just wanted to make a quick plug that if you or someone you know is interacting with someone who's either actively experiencing homelessness or about to experience homelessness, you can go to indycoc.org. That's indycoc.org, and there's some resources available on there, depending on their different situations and the like. COC stands for Continuum of Care, so it's building off of that coalition building, and it's different organizations in Indy that work towards eliminating homelessness.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, and I think we are out of time.
We're out of time. This is just the beginning of this conversation. As I said, I will walk to the front. This is the beginning of the conversation related to housing. Thank you for bringing this issue. You have resources here in this room. Talk to them, exchange information with them. But we're going to continue these conversations because we know that, as Rabbi Aaron said, this issue is going to get worse. So what are those specific issues that we can collectively talk about? What are those resources? We're going to have more conversations in the coming months. We'll be inviting different speakers so that you have different information available about this. Most of them will be via Zoom. We're still figuring out this space, so give us grace as this was a little crowded, but we really felt that today was so important for us to get together, for you to be able to meet our team, and also to meet firsthand the resources that we were able to bring today. So thank you very much, and safe travels back home.
Good.